I'm here right now with Amy Bream, who is a Nike adaptive athlete and currently taking the CrossFit world by storm. She was born without her right leg and has never let that stop her from chasing her dreams. Amy, thanks so much for joining me today.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
So I met you through Title Nash, which is a kickboxing gym here in Nashville. You're the operations director there, but you had moved to Nashville with the intent of becoming an artist. Where did the change up happen?
Oh, life's a funny thing, you know? Yeah, I was actually a commercial music major in college, and I moved here in 2014, every intention of, pursuing music, but was a little apprehensive, not quite sure, what it would look like. And, definitely did the whole playing around town thing, all of that great stuff that everyone does in Nashville. And I realized in the first few years that I was doing it more because I felt like it was just what I'd always identified as, like a musician, and that's kind of like what I needed to do, but I wasn't actually enjoying the process. I love music, I still love music, but the more I did it in that capacity, I found I was kind of falling out of love with music. So I decided to lay that down. It was a rough couple of years, if I'm being honest, in Nashville, and in 2017 I was just like, let's just start from scratch, figure out what I like. I was boxing at Title, like for fun, and then was offered like a fun part-time job. I had a marketing position at another company. I just did it on the weekends for fun, and it just morphed into this, I didn't start any of that with a specific intent other than I liked who I was becoming in the process, and I just was having fun, and here we are.
Oh, well, also along that journey, you've started to share a very vulnerable side of your life and of your journey. What inspired you to start talking about and sharing the story of growing up with a birth defect?
Yeah, so around the same time, like around 2017, again, like I had some things happen that kind of rocked my world a little bit, and I wasn't sure what direction to do, if I was even going to stay in Nashville. And I had two really close friends of mine. They came over for like a girls' wine night, and they were like, why don't you ever like share your story? And I remember thinking, because I've thought this quite a bit growing up, like, well, people, I don't want to say anything because I've never even had an amputation. It's a birth defect. I've just always had one leg. And so for some reason I thought that like, counted me out. I was like, people don't want to hear it. It's just like me growing up. It's whatever. And they're like, well, you probably like have some insight that you don't even realize, or just like a cool world. Like asking people that are amputees or anything can be such a taboo. People are a little nervous around it. And I've had it for so long, very, very little offends or shocks me anymore. So I was like, well, I want people to know and understand this world, just understand how cool it is. So if I'm not going to be offended by the questions, I should be the one to like just start the conversation. So that's kind of where it started. And I had no idea it would lead me where I am now, but it's been great.
It's funny you say sharing that side and you wouldn't be offended in anything, and you blew up on social media after some videos went viral of you competing at the CrossFit Games and being an adaptive athlete. What was that first feeling like when you're like, holy crap, my account was blowing up?
Yeah, it was a lot. I wasn't expecting any of that. And it's funny because if you like know me, I don't like to cry in public at all. And in that video, I was crying. And of course, it's like what I went viral for. Like my friends give me such a hard time about it. But yeah, all of that happened within like a week. So it was like very much a blur. I was not expecting any of it. And it definitely took it took a while. It's been quite a year just to adjust to. But I remember, again, like I was second guessing kind of like how I was posting, because I like to be a dork, just like be myself, whatever. I don't care, on Instagram. And I had, Jared and Tyler at the gym. And at one point they kind of called me out, and they're like, you're trying too hard. Like you're trying to like act like you have X amount of followers, but like you're a dork. And like, for whatever reason that's worked for you. So just like keep doing what you've always been doing and just be you. And it doesn't matter how many people are following, just like keep doing it. And that kind of reset my mind and just kind of took the tension out of it. And I was just, yeah, let's just see where this goes.
I love that you have the people in your life that can always make sure to set you straight. Mm-hmm. That's a good thing to have.
Always. I don't tend to like it in the moment, but afterwards I'm grateful for it.
We never like being told some of the truth, right?
Exactly.
Until it actually happens. What's one thing you hope people take away when they hear you talk about your journey across the board?
That's a great question. Definitely the idea that, the fact that there's really nothing separating me and anyone else. I specifically remember telling my coach Scooter on the way back from the games, I posted that video and I randomly checked my Instagram and it was like nothing I'd ever posted, just like blowing up. And I was like, I think like this is a thing, I think. And I told him one of my greatest fears, as much as this is amazing, is that someone like a middle school girl who maybe has lost her leg or deals with confidence, like struggling with that in herself, is going to look at my profile and think that we're unrelatable. And there's like a separation between what I've been able to accomplish and what she can do. And there's really not. I did not grow up an athlete. I didn't touch sports. I didn't wear pants I didn't wear shorts. I wore mostly pants until I was like 21, 22, because I was so self-conscious. And I just did a little bit every day that made me feel uncomfortable. And I put people in my life that I trusted, very few people that I allowed to speak into my life and keep me accountable, and just a little bit more each day to like bring me a tiny bit further. And that, like one of my favorite quotes is, the more that you do, it's not that you become less afraid, it's that you become more brave. And that has been 100% my journey. And I truly, truly believe that no matter your circumstances, like even if you're not going to be a CrossFit athlete, you can go so, so far if you just do a little bit at a time.
Yeah. And you mentioned how you wanted to share this part of your journey because it's important for people to see all these kind of different things you've went through, even if it was hard for you. Mm-hmm. And I think looking at your story, what I've been able to see is that you should never give up on yourself. Watching you, you show all the sides of it, everything that's hard, and you want to give up, but you don't, and you keep pushing through. And that's something I've learned just following you and being around you, which I think is a cool lesson in itself. Thanks. But what has kept you going through all of those really hard moments in your life where you're like, there's no way I can't do this. This is not going to happen.
I think a couple of things. Definitely, once you cross one hurdle and see the other side of it, even if you don't like, I think you start to recognize, like maybe before the next hurdle comes, you're like, oh no, these feelings are coming back. I don't prefer feeling this way, but you also are like, well, I got over that, so I can do this too. Again, like not less afraid, more brave. So experiencing that, but also on a really real level, I realized the power of the words that I speak to myself. For a really long time, it wasn't things that I was saying out loud necessarily, but I realized how negative my self-talk was. And so I was just really intentional about, again, such a tiny thing. Like I started my day with I wrote down 3 insecurities and wrote the opposite of them. And 95% of the days I was annoyed and I didn't believe them, but I still made myself say it out loud. And I'm a huge believer that eventually, like even if you don't believe it, you eventually will believe it. So there's power in that. So, when I'm insecure and feeling all of those things, I say the opposite of what I feel. And also just placing people in your life that can keep you accountable. There's plenty of times I've been like the absolute worst, like such a brat. And then those people know who they are in my life, who can speak to me, and they have, and been pretty direct. And even if I don't like it in the moment, I trust them enough that I know when I need to be humbled a little bit. And it's really made a huge difference.
Absolutely. People always mention the thing about blowing up or going viral, that the most important thing is to stay true to who you are. Mm-hmm. And the way to do that is to be surrounded by the right people.
Yeah.
And absolutely. It sounds like you found that, which I think is cool.
Yeah. It's been great.
And talking on those hard moments, what's one challenge that comes to mind that you faced that seemed so impossible for you to accomplish, but then you did?
Honestly, keeping it, it might seem obvious, but going into the CrossFit Games last year, it was like I was very new to CrossFit. I had a very unique journey. I actually don't work out at a CrossFit gym. I never have. My first step into a CrossFit gym was the Saturday before I left for the games, which was like very unique. I started CrossFit in January 2021 when an adaptive athlete told me it was the first year that CrossFit had an adaptive division. I didn't know, like, you don't have to know anything about CrossFit, but there's something called the Open, which is like an online qualifier. You go through a bunch of hoops to be able to get to an in-person competition like the games. And so I started it for fun on a whim, started following my coach around because he was working with us. And, eventually it like turned into this thing and I was able to go to the next round. And all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to this competition. But I was 6 months into the sport, which like doesn't happen. It was a great opportunity, especially it being the first year of adaptive. Like all the stars kind of aligned for it. I worked very hard, but like there's a lot of opportunity there as well. So I had such fear and anxiety going in. Like I had to mute every account associated, like a fellow competitor, CrossFit, everyone, because all the posts I ever saw from any athlete were like, let's go, we're so pumped. I'm like, no one's scared. Like no one is acknowledging that this is actually quite terrifying. We're about to like work out in front of thousands of people. Like, okay. And it was just so overwhelming because I was like, I feel like I'm the only one that's scared. Like, should I? And it was such imposter syndrome. It was unreal. But yeah, and I faced that. Like there was so many things that like helped me through it. And I definitely had many moments of feeling weak, which I think in that video that went viral, the emotion of that was me feeling all of the months and the days leading up to it and the workouts leading up to it, which is why it was such an emotional moment between myself and even my coach, because he also understood it. And so, it was definitely worth it, but it was not an easy journey.
I think it's even cooler that was the moment that went viral because it's showing everything coming to a head. All of your feelings, everything you went through up into that moment.
Yeah. It really was. It sounds so cliche, but it really felt like a movie. It was like surreal. I didn't even really know what was happening. It didn't really click that I was even crying and I didn't know a camera was on me until like after everything. And people were like, oh my gosh, that was amazing. And it was so over my head. I was like, oh, you watched? Like, thank you. Like I had no clue. And then I was like, oh, someone caught that on film. And so.
You were just happy to have gotten through it. Yeah. That was what you were feeling.
Yeah. I was like, I didn't die. Here we go. So
you had said this a little bit earlier and they say hindsight's always 20/20. Do you feel like your life worked out how it's supposed to instead of how you intended for it to?
Yes. Yes. And like, that is one of the most annoying things to say too, because if you had talked to Amy 5 years ago, 6 years ago, like even, I mean, people that would see me on social media from high school are probably like, what? Like, I mean, night and day. Like I still have my personality. I'm still me in a lot of ways, but like also it's like a 180. And so a lot of moments of honestly pain and struggle of why I didn't understand, why things weren't working out, why like doors were being shut. And I just kept coming up against this like, imaginary wall and then realizing, okay, well, like, do I want to spend the rest of my life like beating my head against a door and actually not enjoying it? Like, I don't feel like I'm growing because I'm not enjoying any part of it. I'm doing it because I feel like I am supposed to. Which really might have come more from outside sources and things that it was just a lot of self journey. I mean, like I feel like from when you graduate college, especially to like age 26, you like grow so much. And like
a lot of life happens.
A lot of life happens. You're like, wow, they did not prepare me for this. So yeah, it was painful. Again, I keep using that word, but like now looking back, I'm like, oh, like that was actually for the good. I just didn't see it at the time.
Do you still play music at all now? Is it just more of a passion than it is the job career pursuit?
Yeah, it definitely is a passion. I mean, I love music. I always will. I was actually also majored in saxophone, and here.
Wow. I need to see you play the saxophone.
Oh, just such a little dork. But I love it. I love the instrument. So I obviously like singer-songwriter with piano and saxophone. That's what I did. And I played like 8 hours a day in college.
Amy, you could have your own jazz club. That's what I'm picturing right now.
A little workout area over here, a little jazz session here. Like, let's just put it all together.
I mean, people do that now and it somehow works.
Yeah,
so
right?
I think you could do that. You could just play jazz while people are working out.
I'm here for it. Yeah.
It could be a vibe.
I'm here.
There's so many people out there with challenging life circumstances and some that are probably similar to yours in some ways. If there's one piece of advice that you could give through your lens of what you've been through, what would it be?
Realize that everyone goes through it. I think especially with like social media, there's such an isolation factor if we're not careful, that we look at these highlight reels, and I don't even necessarily feel that there's a problem with someone sharing their highlights. Like if they're being untruthful about it, that's where I have an issue. But like, yeah, you can show your wins. That's great. Like if you don't want to show the moments you're not winning, that's okay. As long as the people watching have the maturity to understand that's not the whole story. Mm-hmm. And I think that's like, it doesn't make it easier necessarily, but there is such a sense of community. Again, like such fear going into the CrossFit games. I remember day one of orientation, me talking with my fellow competitors and just people that I met that are now friends, and hearing them, I'm like, oh, everyone's scared. We're just not saying it.
Yeah. And it's not a common thing to say, hey, I'm scared. Yeah. Hey, I'm vulnerable. That's not something we encourage often.
Yes. Yeah. And even like this past year too, I was able to talk with some other athletes that like, I mean, I've looked up to, they've been in the sport for 15 years and are like really, big names in CrossFit. And I had the opportunity to have some real conversations with them too. And they said the same thing. One person was like, we all wake up on day one terrified and feeling less than, like, and that we can't do this. And it's like, he's one of the biggest names in CrossFit. And just, it was such a relief to be like, oh my gosh, like we are all in that space. And like, again, not that you have to go spill your guts on social media if that's not what you want to do, but just recognizing like, I'm not alone in this. And so if I feel this, like they feel this, and we can just figure it out together rather than seeing it as me versus them kind of thing.
Yeah, that's an important lesson for sure. There's one more thing I want to ask you, being somebody that was born with a birth defect, and I'm not someone who was. Mm-hmm. If you could tell me something, or people who haven't been born with one, mm-hmm. that you wish you could have told back in the day when you were going through it and you were learning so much about yourself, that you wish people like me would know, what would it be?
That is a great question. No one's ever asked me that before.
Well, I think there's so much beauty in learning and understanding things that we didn't grow up around or have to deal with, because everybody has different challenges. Just because I didn't have that didn't mean I didn't have other things, mm-hmm. but I love learning about other people's, because then it allows me to be more open-minded. It allows me to be more sensitive and empathetic towards things. So I think it's important that we learn that.
Yeah, no, I genuinely love that. I think one thing, probably just an awareness, maybe to create an empathy if possible, of like, one thing that I'm very grateful about having my birth defect, when I go into the gym, I'm very aware of the potential emotions of everyone around me, because, I've always worked hard in the gym, and I know that when I walk into a gym, the chances of a stranger telling me, oh my gosh, that's awesome, great job, even if I'm being really lazy, they're probably still going to say it because they see a physical challenge. And I've always thought, well, if I'm going to get the compliments regardless, I want to feel like I've earned them. Like I actually want to work hard. I want to get better, and also do it for the person that's maybe next to me that's actually struggling more because of anxiety, but no one knows it. And so they're just struggling in silence. And so that's one thing that I'm very grateful that I think, growing up with a birth defect, because it does affect you, emotionally, physically, mentally, all of those good things, that it's created that automatic awareness that I wish that I could transfer to other people as well. Of just even, I've had it for so long, I'm really comfortable with it, it's cool, but maybe the way that people approach someone with any kind of disability, where it's like, hey, they're not broken, they're not fragile, they're okay, but like also, like, let's frame these conversations in a way that's going to make them feel comfortable, and not like, oh dear, like, look how cute you are, but like, good job. But like, no, like, they're killing it. Like they're actually able to thrive. Like there are moments when, they're just a human being living their life, and like, let's have cool conversations and learn about prosthetics and, their life, and without making them feel less than. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
I think that's the perfect thing to end on, and an important lesson for all of us to take away from this, if they take away anything. Yeah. So, Amy, thank you so much for joining me and just being on here with me today.
Of course.
Make sure to follow Amy on Instagram. You want to shout that out?
Oh, yeah. You can't make it up. It's at one leg to stand on.
The best Instagram name.
I try.
Well, thank you again for being with me.
Awesome. Of course. Thanks so much, Morgan.